My daddy served in the army. We lost his right eye, but he flew a flag out in our yard till the day that he died.
Hello? Oh. Good evening. I've got to tell you that what I have seen, I came from Washington today. Now, I didn't have much in the way of expectations for the rally that they were holding in what is, after all, the heart of darkness, right? Washington, D.C. But they had to have between 1,500 and 2,000 people turn out in Lafayette Park today. And I was impressed. Even the media guys who came, they couldn't deny it. And just as I see here, it's going on all over the country. Yeah. And those feelings don't bode very well for all the people who are trying to drive this country over the cliff into socialism and despotism and oblivion. We've had enough. I think we need to spend a little moment asking ourselves what it is that has really brought us to this point. Why we are gathered here today, such a short time after the United States was striding the world like a colossus, the last superpower, having defeated our enemies, laid the communist Soviet Union prostrate before us. And suddenly we find ourselves now faced with an elite that tells us that our day is done, that our prosperity is over, that they shall now impose upon us the very regime that we slaved so hard to defeat. We must tell them no. To do that, we're going to have to understand what has really gotten us to this point. Now, I know that there are lots of folks who are saying that it's those nasty, greedy bankers and investors on Wall Street. And you want to know the truth? I don't think they're wrong. I don't think they're wrong to suggest that it was wrong to depart from sound banking principles in order to create phony loans that then became the basis for fraudulent investment interest for short-term profit. It was wrong, and we ought to condemn it. But you know, before you get your pitchforks out for the bankers, I think you ought to take a look at who was pushing them into this mess. Who told them that they had to give politically correct loans that didn't make any business sense. That they had to stop doing their job so that they could go back home and say that they've gotten affordable housing for the poor and the minorities. I think it's time that we recognize that if the greedy bankers pushed us with the greed, then the ambitious politicians certainly pushed us with their willingness to sacrifice the common good for their ambition. In case anybody thinks that they might misunderstand me here, and I'm just pointing the finger at the nasty, bad old Democrats. I wouldn't want you to get me wrong. I am pointing the finger at them. But you know what I have to remember, y'all? And I say this as somebody who spent a good deal of time in the Republican Party. Most of you know me in that guise, until I came to this very town back in last year to announce that this was no longer going to be the case. And do you know why? Well, I'll tell you why. For the very reason that we then witnessed last fall. Because if Barack Obama is driving us like a freight train over the cliff into socialism, G.W. Bush held the door open for him. And what really I don't understand, even somebody like John McCain, if he had really had any ambition to be president, you know all he had to do? He had to stand up and oppose that bank bailout. He had to look those guys in the eye and tell them that the people weren't going to bail out the very people who got us into this mess in the first place. He would have told them that he wasn't going to buy the lie that you're going to help threaten homeowners by pouring billions and billions of dollars into the pockets of the folks who put them in trouble in the first place. He wouldn't have said that. He would have looked them in the eye and told the truth, and he did not. Instead, they went along with that giant leap into socialism which has given Barack Obama and his faction the license now to loot our treasury and to put onto our children and our grandchildren a burden of debt that they will never be able to repay. And here's what I don't understand. I don't understand the logic that tells the American people. And as we look at this situation, we see the bankers and the politicians pursuing their ambition and their greed. And then we're told that the solution to the problem is to take the most massive amount of money that we don't even have and put it under the control of those same politicians, of those same bureaucrats, of those same central bankers. I don't understand. I'll tell you something. What do you think is going to do the most good in America? You think it's going to do more good for us to take $1 and put it in the hands of a bureaucrat, take $1 and let a politician spend it in order to build up his political empire? Take $1 and let international bankers put it in the use of people outside the United States? Do you think that's the best use? Or should we leave that money in the hands of the American people so they can make the best use of it? If we're going to do more than come together on this day and let off a little steam and show everybody how upset we are, then we're going to have an agenda that corresponds to the real goal that will save this country. And there's only one way to do that. And that is to stand up and finally resolve that we will no longer accept their phony choices, that we will no longer believe their phony promises, that we have come to the point where we recognize the truth. Whatever label is behind your name, it's time for you to go. We've got to throw the funds out. I know. I hear it again. People will say, but Alan, you don't want to throw out the good guys with the bad guys. And I will tell you, my friends, in the situation we're in right now, the good guys are going to have to prove it all over again. As we've been through that, we've been to listening to people who gave us the promise of limited government, gave us the promise of lower taxation, gave us the promise that they would respect the liberties and the initiative and the enterprise of our people. And what did they do? We handed them the presidency and we handed them the Congress, and they proceeded after a very short interlude to act just like the people they had replaced until finally they got kicked out as well. What does that tell you? It tells you that for all their promises, they won't deliver. All they're doing is finding the consultants and pollsters to tell them what we want to hear. Okay? Well, I think it's time that we told them that we're not listening any longer to their lies, that the only thing we're going to believe is when things get done to put the decisions and put the control of the money and put the political power back in the hands of the people where it's supposed to belong. This brings me, though, to one of those times when I'm going to violate the rules of political life. You probably noticed that I violate the rules of political life quite frequently. I'm told this because political life these days consists of finding out what the people want to hear and then lying to them about it. So they believe that you believe what they believe until it all becomes kind of a virtual reality. Lying politicians telling folks things they want to hear so they'll cast a vote that doesn't accomplish a darn thing. But I think it's time that we started telling some truth to one another. Not like candidates running for office or politicians looking for power, but just like Americans and citizens trying to figure out what's right for our country. And when we get to that point, maybe we'll remember what Abraham Lincoln told us about the real nature of our government in this country. Didn't he call it government of, by, and for the people? Yeah, he did. You know what that means, don't you? Well, I do. I remember it every now and again. It means that while you're pointing the finger at the politicians, and while you're pointing the finger at the bankers, and while you're pointing the finger at their greed and at their ambition and at their irresponsibility, I think you better go home and look in the mirror and start to point some fingers at yourself. What have we been doing for the last 40 and 50 years but acting as if we were consumers of government promises, consumers of government programs, when we are supposed, in fact, to be the sovereign people of the United States, not